So Simon Sinek, leader versus manager. And I'll tell you, I absolutely love this topic. I got to caution myself from becoming too obsessed with this topic, which is, is a leader a manager? No. But, there's a reason why this comes up again and again and again, is because, well, when you're doing leadery things, you got to do a bit of management. And then there's all those managers out there who are not leaders that the corporate environment is trying to make into leaders. I touched a little bit on that on the last episode, but here we go. Let's watch it.
There are two things that I think that great leaders need to have: empathy and perspective. And I think these things are very often forgotten. Leaders are so often so concerned about their status or their position in an organization, they actually forget their real job. And the real job of a leader is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in our charge. And I don't think people realize this, and I don't think people train for this. When we're junior, our only responsibility is to be good at our jobs. That's all we really have to do. And some people actually go get advanced educations so that they can be really good at their jobs, accountants or whatever, right? And you show up and you work hard, and the company will give us tons and tons of training how to do our jobs. They'll show us how to use the software. They'll send us away for a few days to get trained in whatever it is that we're doing for the company.
Yes, it's always technical oriented.
And they expect us to go be good at our jobs. And that's what we do. We work very hard. And if you're good at your job, they'll promote you. And at some point, you'll get promoted to a position where we're now responsible for the people who do the job we used to do, but nobody shows us how to do that. And that's why we get managers and not leaders. Because the reason our managers are micromanaging us is because they actually do know how to do the job better than us. That's what got them promoted. Really what we have to do is go through a transition.
I know this one personally.
Some people make it quickly, some people make it slowly, and unfortunately some people will never make that transition at all. Which is we have to go through this transition of being responsible for the job and then turning into somebody who's now responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. And as I said before, one of the great things that is lacking in most of our companies is that they are not teaching us how to lead. And leadership is a skill like any other. It is a practicable, learnable skill.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And it is something that you work on. It's like a muscle. If you practice it all the days, you will get good at it and you will become a strong leader. If you stop practicing, you will become a weak leader.
Yep.
Like parenting, everyone has the capacity to be a parent.
Yep.
Doesn't mean everybody wants to be a parent, and doesn't mean everybody should be a parent.
Yep.
Leadership is the same. We all have the capacity to be a leader. Doesn't mean everybody should be a leader, and it doesn't mean everybody wants to be a leader. And the reason is because it comes at great personal sacrifice.
Yeah, it does.
Remember, you're not in charge, you're responsible for those in your charge.
I got to somewhat pause here because what he's saying is true, but sort of not true too. This is the one thing I'll say about Simon Sinek. I've seen enough of his videos to see this kind of mindset, and it's not bad, but it's not the whole picture. Leadership skills definitely involve what he's describing right there, but it does not come at the cost of the vision. I think I talked about this in the last episode about servant leadership, that I like servant leadership, but there's a limit to that. It's servant leadership in context of a vision. And so there's always pushing towards that vision. And then what the skills are that you're using to obtain and go after that vision kind of goes to what he's talking about. So once it moves beyond yourself, you're moving towards that vision through people. Right? And that's when we really start talking about leadership. The problem with what he's saying is he hasn't said the word vision one time. And I would just say right out of the gate, leader versus manager is vision oriented. It's way more to do with vision, not necessarily what he's describing, because a manager, and we'll see, we're almost done here. We got about a minute left. A manager is a person who is doing the proverbial bean counting and the adjusting of resources in an organization or whatever, and people is part of that equation. Now, they're measuring the outputs, for example, like managers are measuring outputs of work that's being done, and they do things like coordinate with that work to get it done and find maybe blockers to get them out of the way. But that's not leadership, that's management. So let's see what the rest of the essay before we go any further.
That means things like when everything goes right, you have to give away all the credit. And when everything goes wrong, you have to take all the responsibility.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
That sucks, right? It's things like staying late to show somebody what to do. It's things like when something does actually break, when something goes wrong.
Yeah, staying
Instead
late.
of yelling and screaming and taking over, you say, try again. When the overwhelming pressures are not on them, the overwhelming pressures are on us. At the end of the day...
Yeah, I got to jump on this one because, I mean, this is, admittedly, he's talking about the transition, going from like a strong doer to a person who's helping another person do. And that can be very interesting, letting people fail. And, I've got a good bit of ways to go in that capacity. I consider myself a very highly skilled doer in many different capacities. I mean, just even like audiovisual, the amount of different things that I have going on in this one particular setup, for most people, it's pretty excessive. But I've been doing this a long time. This is just my first foray and hey, I'm going to kick off a podcast. So if I were to go and bring somebody in on this, there's two types of people that I might bring in on a podcast. Down in the road. There's number one, there's the person who does not know these skills, which is kind of what he's talking about. And this is where I also kind of disagree with him and some of his characterizations of this. If you bring in somebody who does not know the skill, you teach them the skills. And you have to be a lot more hands-on because you have to do things like you have to set the barrier for quality, and they don't know how to meet that. And so you have to walk them down the quality. And in some of these jobs, some of these activities, it's much more complex than just something you're going to create on a checklist. And you have to do a lot of hand-holding. There's a second kind of person that you might bring on, and that's a person who knows more than you do about any task. So if I were to bring somebody in audiovisual and they don't know more than me, they're going to fall in that first camp, and I'm going to have to get them up to speed on a lot of different things. Microphones, microphone placement, video cameras, video camera placement, how to wire all this stuff together, amplifiers, connecting HDMI devices, configuring, I've got this Stream Deck thing over here. I've got lighting going on. All of these things are actually what's required to do, AV. I got to learn all those things. That's a lot of stuff to learn. I'm 36 years old. I've been doing this stuff since I was 14 years old, recording skate videos, and then, doing editing and stuff like that. So bringing somebody on for that, but that other person in a lot of ways is very different than what he's talking about. Because when you're bringing on somebody who knows more than you, you've got to know enough to be able to manage that person, but you really have to start leaning on them as the actual experts. So when they tell you, we're going with this camera, we're going up with this setup, and it's going to cost this, you make decisions on it and you just go with it, because good teams, powerful teams, which is not what he's talking about at all. He's not even sort of talking about power teams. Power teams, you have to have that dynamic. You got to have that. Let's see if I've got one right. You're doing a tripod, right? Where they're all, you're leaning against each other. You can't lean against someone who's not as strong as you. You fall over. Because you're leaning up against them. So he's not really going into that kind of stuff. This is very much you're going to hire a bunch of people and then you're going to tell them what to do. It's very anti, for example, there's a great quote out there by Steve Jobs that says, "We hire smart people. Not so that we can tell them we don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. We hire smart people so they can tell us what to do. That's why you hire smart people. So anyways, moving on.
Great leaders are not responsible for the job. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the job. They're not even responsible for the results. I love talking to CEOs and say, what's your priority? And they put their hands on their hips all proudly and say, my priority is my customer. I'm like, really? You haven't talked to a customer in 15 years. There's no CEO on the planet responsible for the customer. They're just not. They're responsible for the people who are responsible for the people who are responsible for the customer.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the end of that. That's a short clip. I think I've actually seen this longer clip in the past. He's true there, but he's missing something. The fact that the CEO is talking about a customer, the reason why they're not responsible for the customer is because the CEO is responsible for the entirety of the business. They're responsible for acquisitions, which is the whole getting customers, this, that, and the other in sales. Then they're in charge of, fulfillment, i.e. providing products and services to, the success of that. And then the operations, which is gluing the whole thing together. They're responsible for all of that. So no, they're not. They ought not be dealing with customers because they got to deal with that whole pie. That's what part of being the leader. When you're being the leader, you take on all of that. You're taking all of those things on all at one time. That's what you are as the leader because it's about the vision. It's not just about the people. So I'm sorry, Simon. I think you're making it easy for many people, but you're just wrong. It's not just about the people. It's about the vision. It's about the entirety of what is being encapsulated. And that's hard. He's a much more people-oriented person. That's one of his things. Simon Sinek is clearly not technical. I don't know what his experiences are of running any organizations. I know he does the talking thing. But when you're responsible for the entirety of the thing, of something that you're entirely responsible for, the people portion of it is a major, major part. But it is still within a larger diameter of the entirety of the thing. He's just pointing out that the doing of the work is not the responsibility of the man or the leader. And I don't really know what that has to do with leader versus manager, because a manager is not responsible for the work either.